Hey everybody, welcome to our first video on OpenHAB. Today we're going to start from scratch with a blank Raspberry Pi and then install OpenHAB home automation software, MQTT connectivity protocol, and InfluxDB as our database. Now the first thing you need to download is the Raspberry Pi operating system. We're going to be going with Raspbian Lite since we won't need the graphic interface or any of the extra programs that come with the full install. Once you get Raspbian Lite downloaded, you will also need a program to put the image file onto a micro SD card for the Pi. I'm using Win32 Disk Imager, which you can download from SourceForge. Once you get Raspbian and Win32 downloaded, you're going to open up the Win32 Disk Imager. You'll browse by clicking on the little folder icon to where you downloaded the image file, and then you're going to select the drive that has the micro SD card. In my case, it's the G drive. Verify all this information is correct. Click Write. It's going to ask you if you want to continue. Say yes. And now it's going to take a few minutes to install the image file onto our micro SD card. Okay, our write was successful. We're going to close out this program. We won't need it anymore. And now we're going to take our micro SD card, put it in the Raspberry Pi, boot that up, and get Raspbian install going. So I'm cheating a little bit. Basically, I've already installed the basic stuff on the Raspberry Pi, and what I'm going to do is SSH into it and show you guys the install steps that I went through. Whenever you're doing SSH, you're always going to get this key warning the first time you connect. Just hit yes if you know that this is the computer that you're connecting to. Log in as Pi. The default password is Raspberry. R-A-S-P-B-E-R-R-Y. And now we're in. Okay, so the setup process that I went through is sudo raspi config. The first time you log into your Raspberry Pi, this is what you're going to do to set up your localization options. So expand your file system first if you haven't done it already. Change your user password to something other than Raspberry. You're going to go to internationalization options. Change locale. And I'm going to page down and go all the way down to en_US. And we're going to use UTF-8. Now hit return. Now I'm going to hit return again on en_US UTF-8 to set the default locale. I'm going to go back to internationalization options, change my time zone. And we are in US, Eastern Time Zone. Back again, change the keyboard layout. We use the generic 105 key. Use English US. If you don't have this already selected, there's going to be another one down here at the bottom that says Other. When you first start it up, it might say English GB for Great Britain. Go to Other, select English US, and then come back to the screen. And it'll say English US. If you don't do this, all of your special keys are going to be all wrong. Use default for the keyboard layout. No compose key. Back internationalization options. Your Wi-Fi country. Let's press U for the United States. Now we're set to US. Go down to advanced options. Host name, enter in something unique. Back to advanced options, SSH. We would like the SSH server to be enabled. Yes. Okay, so now we are enabled. Everything is done. Use the left and right arrow keys to finish. And we're going to reboot now, and I'm going to lose connection since I'm SSH'd in. Okay, my Pi is rebooted, and I'm going to log in here using Pi. I left the default password, Raspberry. Now I'm going to go through my wireless setup by editing the WPA supplicant file. So sudo nano. First time that you look at this file, it should look pretty much like this. You're just going to have your country listing, nothing else about networks or interfaces or any of that stuff. So we're going to have to manually type all this stuff in. Let's go to network. you just type in your SSID name or your wireless router name. PSK is going to be your router password. So you just type in whatever your password is. Make sure you close that off. Do Control X with nano and press Y to save. And then you do a sudo if down wireless LAN 0. And that's going to bring the interface down. Do sudo if up wireless LAN 0. That's going to bring the interface back up, and that's going to refresh that file. So hopefully it'll connect you to your network. After a few seconds, you'll be able to do a ifconfig, and that's going to show your interface status. And eventually you're going to see this populate with an IP address. Once you have the IP address, you can test for connectivity by doing ping www.google.com. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. We're going to hit Control C to break. Clear the screen. And now we can go on with actually installing everything else that we need. So first thing to do is going to be sudo apt-get install. I want to say yes. Okay, now that that's done, we're actually going to go through the OpenHAB files. So I have all these written down here. What I'm going to do is just copy and paste all these in here since I don't want to type it all out. Return. So we're going to add in the key for there. Now we're going to add this to our source. That's on there. Now we'll update it. Once that's done, we're going to do a sudo apt-get install OpenHAB. You can use the tab key. If you double tap on it, it's going to give you a list. Right now there's 196 possibilities. We don't want to list all those. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to do openhab-runtime. Okay, we'll do sudo system control. Enable OpenHAB. So at this point, all the core files should be set up, and now we're going to do the add-on files for MQTT and for the InfluxDB. So do sudo apt-get So these are the only two that we're going to do right now. Just OpenHAB add-on binding MQTT, OpenHAB add-on persistence InfluxDB. If you're ever not sure which one you want to do, you can do tab key twice. These are all the different add-ons that they have available right now. You can use MySQL, Mongo, logging. The thing to watch out for with Influx is there's two different versions, InfluxDB and InfluxDB 08. 08 is for the earlier versions of it. We're not going to use that. Let's stick with the regular InfluxDB. Okay, our two bindings are installed, and now I'm going to open up another session on here, just so I can have something going here in the background. I'm going to list the directory of OpenHAB log files. And right now there's nothing in there, meaning that OpenHAB is not running. I know it's not running because it's not generating log files. And the reason why it's not running is because we don't have Java installed. So let's go through that. This is going to be a long download, so I'm going to step away for a few minutes. Alright, Java's finally finished, so we're going to do a quick update. And we're going to check our version real quick. Alright, so we see we have 1.8.0, which is the current version. Let's restart OpenHAB, see if we can get this thing going. Let's give this a second. Alright, now we have logs that are actually being generated, so we know that OpenHAB has actually started. Now, since we're just getting this going, I'm going to enable the debug logging on here so I can see all of the errors that wouldn't normally come through with the information level. So I'm going to change over to my OpenHAB directory, and you can see two logback files on here. One is the debug and one is the regular. So we're going to make a copy of the regular file. Sudo. So I have a backup copy of the log file. I'm going to copy the debug into the regular one. Now the reason why I'm doing it this way is that I don't have to go into the configuration file and edit things around. Now I'm going to do a tail. Now this way I can actually see the log file as it's scrolling on here. So if I restart this again, now I can see it stopped and it's going to reboot and it's going to pull from the debug log file this time. Now that this is restarted, you can see on here the MQTT binding has been started and the InfluxDB has been started. And these are those two add-on files that we installed earlier. Now we're going to add Mosquito. So we'll do an apt-get install Mosquito and Mosquito clients. And I'm going to Control-C this real quick. And Mosquito is installed, so I'm going to do a subscription service on this side. Debug messages, subscribe to the topic. Hello world. So now I'm connected to Mosquito. I'm listening on the topic Hello world. So any messages that are sent to this topic, I'll be able to see over here. I'll do Mosquito publish topic Hello world, and my message is going to be Hello world. Now I can see over here on the client we have received a publish to this topic, and this is the message Hello world. So now I know Mosquito is working on the system. So break out of here. I'll go back to tail my log. Now we're going to install Influx. So I'll copy some commands back over here. We're going to add the Influx key. I'll change my source. To OS release. I'm going to copy this over. Now we've added the Influx repository for Jesse, which is the version of Raspbian that we're using. I'll do sudo apt-get update and install InfluxDB. And Influx is finished install, so we're going to start the service. Now we're going to go through creating the Influx database and adding the users on here. So we'll type in Influx. And first thing, create database. This database name, you can put it as whatever you want. I'm just going to use OpenHAB because that's simple. We'll do show database. Okay, it should be show databases, plural. Now we can see we have internal, which is the one that's default created, and then the one we just did, OpenHAB. So use OpenHAB. So now we're going to create our users. So create user pi, which is our login. And I'm going to use my login password. And I'm going to create another user for OpenHAB. Now I'm going to grant write privileges on OpenHAB to OpenHAB user. Now if I show users, I'm going to see that the Pi user is an administrator and OpenHAB user is not. That's exactly how we want it to be. One other extra step that we need to do on here is just check the retention policies real quick. So let's do show. This auto-generated retention policy is basically saying save all the information infinitely. And one of the problems that we might run into later on down the road is that there isn't a retention policy called default. So we're going to make one now. Now I want to verify that that policy actually made it onto the OpenHAB database. So we can see default, duration, same thing. And this is the default because it's true. So now I'll quit that. So now we have MQTT and InfluxDB installed. We're going to adjust the OpenHAB configuration so that it sees both of them. Now this OpenHAB default config file, we're going to make a copy of that as just openhab.config, and we'll keep that as a backup. I'm going to change ownership of this file. I'm going to do a sudo nano of the OpenHAB. And there's only a few lines that we need to edit on here. So right here on this persistence, we're going to change this to InfluxDB. Right here. We'll page down a ways. And in persistence configuration, you notice we have two of these in here. We have InfluxDB 08 and regular InfluxDB. We're going to use the regular InfluxDB. Change this to HTTP, localhost, and port 8086. The user is going to be OpenHAB. Password is OpenHAB. So we already established those in the Influx configuration. And the database name is Influx, or excuse me, OpenHAB. So the InfluxDB is pretty much configured. So let's scroll down further again to transport configuration and MQTT. So here, this is where we're going to establish a name for MQTT that we're going to use within OpenHAB. So we'll just call it Mosquito. And the URL is going to be localhost 1883. The only other option that we need to change on here is going to be to retain. We're going to set this to true. And the broker again, Mosquito. The QoS, the username, password, and the client ID, you don't have to set them up. You can do it later on, but we're not going to do it this time around. So let's Control X, save it, yes, OpenHAB config. and restart OpenHAB. Go back over here to our tail. Okay, so this is all done, and you can see on here that we don't have any errors. This is all just debug info. That's pretty much exactly how we want it to look. So now we're going to create the persistence file for InfluxDB that's going to provide different plans for how it's going to save the information, and we're going to tell it which information to save. So we're already in the configurations directory. We'll do sudo nano persistence, and it's going to be influxdb.persist. This is a new file that we're creating. I already have it written down, so I'm going to do a copy and paste. You can see these are different strategies. We can save it every hour, every day, every minute, 5 minutes, 5 seconds. So if no strategy is specified, the default is going to be every minute. So the items that we want to save, we'll use an asterisk as a wildcard to say store everything. If you don't want to store everything, let's say you have a living room temperature, you might call it living temp for living room temperature. This will save just that one thing, but when we get into the items file, it's going to make a little bit more sense. So for right now, let's just keep this as an asterisk. Control X, yes, save that. We can go back over here and see if that picks it up. There we go. So OpenHAB is constantly scanning these directories, and it's going to notice when you have a new file in there. So notice all this stuff every hour, minute, day. All right. So let's create the items file. We'll just call this default.items. I also have one of these already prepared, so I'm just going to copy and paste. Expand this out just a little bit. Okay, so you have groups in OpenHAB. This is going to be called group G all. The reason why there's a G in front of there is because sometimes you'll use that word all, or sometimes you might come up with another word that's already going to be used somewhere else in the programming. Now this is saying that this is going to be a number. This is the name that OpenHAB is going to use, living temp. This is a description of it that will show up on the sitemap. We want to use 2 decimal places, and this is going to be F for Fahrenheit. You can change this to C, change it to D, change it to whatever you want. We'll leave it as F. We'll use the temperature icon on the sitemap. It's part of group all. You can also add in, let's say, group living if it's in the living room, and then up here we'll just assign group G living. You do group G temp for temperatures, and these are all part of group G all. Now the MQTT configuration, this is coming in on MQTT. We're using mosquito name. The topic is going to be home, living room, temp. And then state and default we're not really going to use. So we'll control X. Make sure that's okay. Say yes. Default items. Let's give this a second to see if it picks it up. And there it goes. So we have default items. So bindings model default items. It's MQTT configuration for living temp. 1 subscription. And it's starting the consumer for mosquito on this topic here. So the last thing we're going to do is go to our sitemap and create a default sitemap. And I'm just going to copy and paste. So we have a sitemap default, and it's going to be called OpenHAB. The frame that everything's going to be surrounded in is going to be called living room, and then we're going to have this text item within that frame called living temp. Basically, this is going to be the living room temperature. Save that file. And now it brought that in there. And you can see storing these items, group all, group living temp, living temp, to the InfluxDB took 0 milliseconds. Basically, that means that it didn't store anything if it's 0. I'm going to open up a web page now and navigate to that. This is going to be the address, 192.168.1. This device is .13, the port 8080. And if you go just on that, it should come up right like there. So you can see the title OpenHAB. This is the frame living room, the name living room temp, and it's F for Fahrenheit. So right now we haven't sent it any values, so we can go back over here. I'll squeeze these around. We'll do a mosquito publish to topic home living room temp, and the message is going to be, let's say, make up a number, 74.12. Let's refresh that, see if it made it in, and it did not. All right, let's try it again. This time there's a slash up here. There, that made it in there that time. So you can see pretty much immediately updated. We'll give this a second to refresh. So now you see it came in at 1601 versus 1600. So that was back on our persistence file when we set it to default be every minute. So every minute it's going to start writing to this InfluxDB. So we're saying got decimal value type 7412, storing it gliving, gtemp, living temp. So let's check on our Influx database by going to the same IP address, but this port 8083, and this website should automatically come up. We'll do show stats, hit return. Now we can see database OpenHAB is actually being written to. We have 2 measurements, 2 series. This is exactly what it should look like when you have one thing that you're writing on there. At this point, we're basically done. The only thing that we're going to do is go back over here. We're going to change this to go back to take out the debug, because we don't need to fill up our log that fast. So let's do a sudo cp copy the backup back to the XML file. Okay. Tail that guy again. Restart OpenHAB just to make sure that grabs that. Alright, now we're all finished. You can see that once you change back to the default XML file, you're not going to get all that information on here. It's just going to be info, really basic overview on everything. If we go back to our OpenHAB, refresh this, since OpenHAB just restarted, there's no value to display on here. So let's send it something real quick. Let's say 76. Now we're at 76.12 degrees in the living room. You know what, let's put a chart on this guy real quick just so people can see what it's like. So we'll do a sudo sitemaps. We'll pull up our default sitemap again. This is a frame label temperature graph, and we will do just that one. We'll do a last 1 hour temp. Service is going to be InfluxDB, period, 1 hour. You refresh, I set it to 60,000 just because I don't want it to refresh that often, but if you have a bunch of different charts on there and a bunch of different values that you're reading, it's going to refresh constantly. So in the grand scheme of things, you don't really want to use OpenHAB for charting. So we'll save that, say yes, default sitemap. Now I can refresh this once this guy grabs it. Now he's got it. Refresh here. So now this is the chart on here. Since it only has 2 values, and it didn't look like it ticked the 1 hour mark. So it only has the 2 values on here, and I can keep sending this stuff to it. I can say 70.12, and then once that information is stored into Influx, I can see that once it updated, it dropped all the way down here to 70.12. So as long as you have a constant stream of data that's coming to this graph is going to populate fairly quickly. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is your storage strategies. We have it defaulted to every minute. So regardless of how many data points you send to it within that minute, it's only going to save it once a minute. So that's it for now. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Thanks.